As we begin this 7 a.m. bulletin with a breaking inside scoop on U.S. capture of Maduro. Now, U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has announced that nearly 200 American soldiers took part in the raid on Caracas, the Venezuelan capital, to capture President Nicolás Maduro and his wife. Nearly 200 U.S. forces were in the capital, Caracas, for Venezuela operation to capture Nicolás Maduro, Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth has said. In his own words, as nearly 200 of our greatest Americans went downtown in Caracas, seems those Russian air defenses did not work so well, did they? Hegseth said at an event in Virginia's Newport on Monday. He also said that the forces grabbed an indicted individual wanted by American justice in support of law enforcement without, and very importantly, without a single American being killed. Here's more.
Reestablishing deterrence. Our southern border, which allowed an invasion of people we didn't know who they were under the previous administration, 7 months of zero crossings at our border. A country that isn't sovereign is not a country. Reestablishing deterrence. And then we saw 3 nights ago in downtown Caracas in Venezuela, as nearly 200 of our greatest Americans went downtown in Caracas. Seems those Russian air defenses didn't quite work so well, did they? Downtown Caracas, and grabbed an indicted individual wanted by American justice in support of law enforcement without a single American killed.
We're getting breaking news from the US, where an inside scoop on the US capture of Maduro has been accessed by NDTV. In the latest, US Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has underlined that nearly 200 American soldiers took part in the raid on Caracas on Saturday. Over the weekend, nearly 200 US forces were in the capital, Caracas, for Venezuela operation to capture President Nicolás Maduro. U.S. Defence Secretary, or Trump's Defence Secretary, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has said on Monday. In his words, as nearly 200 of our greatest Americans went downtown in Caracas, seems those Russian air defenses didn't work so well, did they? Hegseth said at an event in Virginia in Newport News. Not only this, he also added that the forces grabbed an indicted individual wanted by American justice in support of law enforcement without a single American being killed. Now, remember, President Donald Trump had indicated that American choppers and American soldiers, American troops, they were taking heavy fire from the Venezuelan military, but that did not result in the loss of life of even a single American soldier. For more on this, my colleague Natasha Estani joins us straight from New York, where Maduro was in fact produced just yesterday. Natasha, first and foremost, a big statement coming in from Hegseth, where he said 200 American troops, in fact, were behind enemy lines, crossed into Venezuelan capital, Caracas, and took President Nicolás Maduro and his wife. And secondly, Natasha, how was the atmosphere outside the New York court where Maduro and his wife were produced last evening?
Yes, for you, what's last evening is earlier in the day for me. So just a few hours ago, I was at the US Federal Courthouse in downtown Manhattan covering Maduro's arraignment. And I have never seen so much press at the US Federal Courthouse. I've covered several cases out there and several high-profile cases. In fact, that's the same courthouse where Donald Trump was also convicted of certain of business fraud last year. But that courthouse, there were 3 to 4 New York City blocks just full of press and also full of protesters, both supporting Maduro and those who are critical of Maduro on both sides. And we actually spoke to both sides. It is unprecedented to have a foreign leader from another country apprehended in that country and then brought to the US. This has only happened once before, which was in 1990 with the Panamanian strongman Manuel Noriega. So it was quite a scene outside the US Federal Courthouse, and that arraignment happened. Maduro said that he was innocent, he was not guilty, that he was kidnapped, and now the legal proceedings, which will start again on March 17th, are likely to take a long time as they wind their way through the US federal court system. And as Maduro argues that he has immunity being the president of Venezuela, whereas US authorities in turn argue that they do not consider the 2024 Venezuelan elections valid, and thereby he's not the legitimate leader of that country.
Right. Natasha, very importantly, you mentioned that they were both protesters and Maduro supporters present right outside the court earlier this day, according to you, in the US. What sense of could you pick from both the protesters and Maduro supporters, and where will Maduro be held till the 17th of March, till the next hearing, as you were just mentioning? Will the couple be in New York, or can they also be transferred to some other facility, Natasha?
So far, what we're hearing is that they're going to continue to be in New York at the Metropolitan Detention Center, which is in the borough of Brooklyn. That detention center, again, has held very high-profile convicted felons in that center. So it is a high-security facility, which is what they want in this case. So we're not hearing of any movement so far, but that could potentially change. And with regards to what they were saying outside the courthouse, they were detractors of Trump who were saying this sets a wrong precedent when a country sweeps into another country and takes out the leader. But on the other hand, there were Venezuelan immigrants, the immigrant community in New York City, who believe that their country has been devastated by Maduro's corruption, and they want to see him on these charges on the United States soil, and they hope that with him being convicted, that there would be a return of a better environment in Venezuela. But as you and I know, that's a really long haul question.
Of course.
It's not going to be easy in Venezuela anytime soon.
Yes, as you just mentioned there, Natasha, only time will tell whether this was for democracy or capital gains and oil, which Trump has in fact been harping on for a while now.